and welcome to the hot Bizfluent Podcast, where we get all up in your business. So let's talk. Today's guests are brought to you by Crush City Realty Group, your premier Houston real estate experts, and luxury real estate agent Elissa Emmons, where everything she touches turns to sold. And finally, Covo Capital, fast, flexible financing for all your commercial lending needs. This podcast is for informational purposes only. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the Bizfluent Podcast or management. Don't forget to stay to the end to find out how to get some of our amazing merch. Now let's get down to business.
Hello, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is. Hello. Welcome to the Bizfluent Podcast today. So we are going to be having a little intimate chat with our host with the most, Mr. JP Byers.
Hey.
We are down a co-host today. Such is the world of real estate that we all work in.
It is
the closing, and sometimes there are delays in those closings. So
in commercial, way more than people would even expect in commercial. It's funny. I've got a property that I've literally had under contract for December 27th. We've been under contract since December 27th
of
2023. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like it's some big multi-million-dollar thing. It's a client of mine was experiencing some challenges, and we had some issues with the other agent that wasn't super fluent in commercial deals, and she caused a few delays, and that just kind of compiled everything into occurring, and more or less my client's going through a foreclosure now that wouldn't have happened had she been a little bit quicker to react and a little bit more trusting. So yeah, no, it's a commercial's a different world, and it's one of those things.
Like, there's a couple of points in there that I want, just in that one story, that I think a lot of the general public doesn't understand. So you can have your real estate license and be a realtor that assists with residential and commercial deals or transactions. It's one license to do both, and yet they are vastly different in the process of listing a property or helping a client find a property to purchase or lease. I just vastly different. And you've done both. You started out doing residential.
Right? Yeah. So I mean, I kind of more or less fell into it. I tripped into doing commercial and realized that commercial was more my speed. It's led to some really tough times. My wife has endured quite a bit of hardship over the decision for me to move away from residential and into commercial. So I guess let's talk about a couple of things. First and foremost, last year I didn't get a paycheck for 6-7 months. This year I didn't get a paycheck for about 7 or 8 months. And so it's very imperative that when you're in a commercial real estate agent, that you either have a bunch of little small things lined up, which I say I haven't gotten a paycheck, but my commercial dues monthly at KW Commercial anyway are $300 a month for KW Commercial, but then I pay an additional $500 a month for my CoStar LoopNet subscription,
which is how you find properties. So you kind of
which is how I find. Yeah, so that's our MLS. Yeah. And unfortunately, LoopNet CoStar is more or less the they hold a monopoly. They don't technically hold a monopoly, but Crexy and a couple of other companies just haven't caught up. And LoopNet CoStar is really good at finding the strengths of other companies and incorporating those strengths into theirs, so that way they can stay on top. And so they've done a very good job of that. But they're also very expensive. On top of that, I also pay for my individual listings, $125 a month on top of that. So technically my monthly cost is, I don't know, just shy of $1,000.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty big pill to swallow when you're used to paying 99 or $110 or whatever as a residential agent. So yeah, I get a couple smaller deals that I can pay those dues for 2 or 3 months, but I don't call them like paychecks because it's not like, hey, congratulations, I just get to pay bills. No, it's like, hey, I get to continue to be an agent.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of differences. Length of time.
I know there's different types of properties. So you can work with people that are trying to purchase a property, or you can work with someone that's trying to sell a property. There's also commercial
leasing. And leasing is done completely different.
Yeah, I mean, with residential leasing, it's fairly straightforward, and you're looking for a house. How many bedrooms do you want? With commercial, there's so many different types of properties that you could try to find. So, like, can you kind of go into what the different classifications are?
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't matter whether you're selling, buying, or leasing. The classifications of different properties is vast. You have everything from different types of residential, and so obviously you're not going to be leasing residential from me, but you want to buy or purchase or sell residential. We've got anything over 4-unit apartment complexes. It's going to be considered a residential, but commercial residential building, a multifamily type kind of setup. You can actually also consider a portfolio. So let's say you have a single family dwelling, but you have 7 houses, and you could sell that onto one commercial contract as a portfolio. But majority of the time, people are thinking apartment complexes, right? And so with those apartment complexes, that's one aspect. So you move from there, and even that gets broken down. Once you start getting closer to the 100 units, once you get to that 100 unit mark, you have a completely different dynamic. Like, everything changes. As an agent, everything changes. So between 5 and 50 units, it's pretty easy to get the seller to pay commissions and for the seller to just more or less concede and take care of all closing costs, including commissions. Once you get above 50, when you're getting towards that 100, you find it a lot harder to get the seller to actually pay buyer commissions. And so your buyer is actually going to wind up paying your commission more frequently. And that's very, very common. You start seeing those smaller numbers. For instance, I've got an agent that I'm working with that accepted a 20-unit apartment complex deal where she was only going to make 1.5 or 2% commission for 20 units. And that 20 units is probably going to be like 1.6, 1.2, somewhere around there, $1 million. Very low number. In a residential side, there's a lot of times where your sellers will expect that the selling agent is going to give a discount to be able to sell that $1.2 million house. And so her having come from that residential side was automatically expected that she was going to be required to take this discount and to explain to her that, hey, that is not the case. We don't take discounts until we're hitting $3.5 million. My last closing was a $1.8 million deal. I took a 3% commission on, and the seller took a 3% commission on. And so it takes a lot longer to get those deals done. 120 days is not uncommon.
Well, I mean, you've been under contract on your other one for 10 months.
Yeah, going on 10 months. And to be 100% honest, right now I'm waiting on an extension to be signed for an additional 2 months. So, I mean, like we're going to go probably 14 to 15 months to get this resolved.
Yeah.
This particular one is having to be taken to court. And so it's sad and it stinks, but it just is something that happens. So you move on from multifamily and you can get into industrial, and then you have breakdowns in different types of industrial. Are you talking about industrial land? Or are you talking about industrial drop yards, which could also just be considered land? Or are you talking about warehousing? Are you talking about manufacturing? And it's not one type of property, even in industrial. And so it's really important to specialize when you get into commercial real estate. I don't have a problem coming from a warehouse background before I got into real estate, handling warehousing, drop yards, transportation type kind of stuff. But that's because I was very involved with the last trucking company and warehouse that I worked in, that I knew and understood everything that was going on, how much they were paying for rent, how much they were paying for electricity, so on and so forth. Once it gets into industrial manufacturing and stuff, I have to step back and I have to really think hard whether I can do my client any justice and whether it would be better off handing them off to more of an industrial specialist that understands the difference between, two-phase power, single phase, two-phase, three-phase, four-phase, and you start getting to super high voltage, whether or not they have step-up transformers and all this other just stuff that I have no clue over. And so, yeah, exactly. And so, like, when it comes to regular warehouses, I can handle that. That's all day. Manufacturing, light or heavy. Light, I might stick my thumb in or my toes in, but most of the time I'm going to stay away from manufacturing, period.
So is a drop yard, to go back to that, is that where you are just using a piece of land to park vehicles? Okay. Yeah.
So it's really common. We'll just use 146 as an example. So anybody that's ever seen has ever seen any kind of construction on a road, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll see this piece of land off to the side of the road where they have all their trucks, water tanks, fuel tanks, all of their tractor equipment. They may even have a small cement plant set up and something like that. That is a drop yard, and whoever owns that land is being paid for them to use that land as a drop yard. And usually those are anywhere between 3 and 10 year contracts, just depending on the length of time they're going to need it for the project. So like our little project that we did here in Seabrook through Kemah was supposed to be a 5-year. It took them 3.5 to finish it, but they're also still working on the other side now through LaPorte, but they're still using the same drop yards to move everything around. It was kind of a central location. And so they'll probably wind up being 7 to 10 year total for those drop yards. And so you can see those on the side of the road, but in the same thing comes when it comes to building a brand new plant, regardless whether it's an oil cracking plant or a chemical plant or whatever. While they're in the process of building these major superstructures, they have to have a place to store their equipment, their pipes, like all the equipment and everything that's being installed. And so they will rent an offsite drop yard for anywhere between, like I said, 3 to 10 years. And they'll come in to a pasture and just literally level it, fill it full of rock, and make sure that it's stabilized. And then they've improved the land for the owner so that he can use it again as a truck yard or a drop yard or something like that along the lines.
Okay. Interesting. And then I'm assuming warehouse is just you're buying basically sheet metal, not buying or leasing, like a sheet metal style building that's just one big open space. Maybe it's been built out.
You'd think so, but the problem with that is a lot of times you find height as being your major issue. Mm-hmm. So like the biggest commodity that we moved at my warehouse was cotton, and a bale of cotton is roughly 3 feet tall by 4 feet to 5, I guess 4 to 4.5 feet deep, and about 2 feet wide. And each bale weighs anywhere between 400 and 600 pounds. And you get these bales of cotton. In order to properly store them and actually use the space in the warehouse, you have to do what's called a high pile. And a high pile is anything over 14 feet. And so your warehouse has to be set up for high pile. And if you don't have permitted high pile, or if your warehouse can't accept anything, then you're wasting a lot of floor space. And so your capability of paying per pallet space depends on how high you can stack. And so just like in a city, the actual value of the warehouse itself is determined by how much you can actually charge per square foot based on the height of stacking capability. And so the taller warehouse, the more valuable it is. And so you get some old school warehouses in downtown Houston that are, 12 foot tall, 14 feet tall, and they are not valued anywhere near as much as 25 and 30 foot, 40 foot tall warehouses are.
And with those, I mean, that ceiling height, what kind of door are you putting on there? It seems like I guess because I come from a world of my previous business, we occupied an office warehouse space. So we had a roll-up door that was maybe, a 12-foot door.
Yeah, and that's
30
so 12 foot is smaller. So 12 foot are smaller. But I mean, it's pretty common to have a 14 or 16 foot door. You got to remember, majority of your trucks are still going to have a maximum height of 13 to 13 and a half feet before they're illegal. And so as long as you can get the truck inside of the warehouse for loading and offloading of different materials, you're going to have the maximum of a 14 to 16 foot door. Now your width is going to be the difference. And you can have anywhere between a 17 and a 25 foot, 25 and 30 foot door. I think the biggest one I've ever run, like a 22 foot door, 22 foot by 16 foot. But then still the majority of your actual bay doors are 10 foot by 10 foot, 10 foot by 12 foot. Because the truck backs in, and even though the truck is 13 foot tall, there's only, 8 foot of actual box space, 8 to 9 feet of box space. And so you don't really need as big a doors as you'd think.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking like heavy hauling types size.
Some odd stuff.
Size.
So your odd size stuff actually goes to an external drop yard. Like the weird big giant stuff doesn't come inside. It's very rare that you have that stuff come inside.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's warehousing, manufacturing, which is where you're making things.
Yep. And you move into retail. And so retail's fun. Man, I've run across some really shady retail shop owners. And I've also run into some of the greatest people on the planet that run retail. Mm-hmm. And they're all walks of life that get into retail, investing. There we go. My brain slipped for a second.
Yeah. So
as a leasee, you're coming in, you want a certain amount of space. You have a budget, and basically your leaseor or the landlord is going to turn around and determine whether or not you have enough money and make enough money outside of this hopeful business you're trying to put into his building, that if something were to happen to your business, you are still going to be able to afford everything, pay all the bills, the electricity, the rent, the required insurance and all that stuff to keep the business up and running, even if it's not making any money. And your hope as a business owner is you get on day one, you start making money. And so, excuse me just a second. I didn't pick up any cash in Vegas, but I did pick up a bug. So, and so, but they're going to work with you. And your question, there's a lot of people that'll come in, especially like brand new people that they're never opened up a store, never thought about opening up a store. And man, they will go straight to to an actual landlord or to the landlord's management company and try to work out the details and everything with them. Well, everything at that point is in the landlord's favor. Yeah. Like they're going to offer as little TI. Yeah, it's not their job. It's their job to look out for the landlord. And if they can rake you over the coals, they're going to. They don't have feelings. This is not a business where anything matters other than dollars and cents. And if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And so, as an agent that works with tenants, it is incredibly great when you get to rake a landlord over the coals. And I've had that opportunity, and I've been on the other side where it's like, hey, it is what it is. This last one is a deal that I'm in the process of working on right now. I don't want to go into too many details because it'll be obvious of who it is to people that might be watching. But I mean, I didn't rake them over the coals, but we literally right off the bat asked for the absolute maximum that this company was going to give us. And they didn't bat an eye and said, absolutely, let's get this done. Let's just go. But my client is getting a stellar deal on a very, very large lease property. And had he gone and just gone straight to them, probably would have gotten a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he would have gotten as good of a deal as having an agent that's going to negotiate for him.
And that's what you just never know what the other side is looking for or what they need in that moment.
No.
I mean, truth can be, or the same can be true on the residential side. You could have this big, beautiful luxury home that's listed, at a certain price. You don't know what they're feeling. So I always tell my buyer clients, like, it doesn't make an offer. If you're interested in it, but you just don't feel like that price makes sense for you, let's make an offer and let's just see, because you don't know. They may be in a situation where, and maybe it wasn't their situation when they listed the property, but maybe the property has been sitting for a couple of months. Maybe they have a job transfer and they just need to
get it done
and close and be able to move on and not worry about having two properties in two states or whatever the case may be. Death in the family.
Thing, right?
You just don't know.
And that's the thing, right? Like, so most people don't understand is even people purchasing luxury properties are the same as people that are purchasing investment properties. Yeah. We almost always find people that are living to the absolute max of their capabilities, right? It's not that they're doing anything that's different than the rest of the people in America. Majority, I've got some friends of mine that are some of the richest people I've ever met that live in incredibly modest. When I told him his house was $400,000 house or $420,000 house, he was like, "There's no way I would never pay $420 for this house." And yet he's probably the richest guy I know. And when I say he's a multimillionaire, he's not like, "Hey, I got $2 million in the bank." I mean, like, he's got $2 million in one of his investments, type kind of thing. Yeah. And so, everybody lives to the maximum.
Is partially how he got there, probably.
That's actually exactly how he got there, is just constant investing, but investing in a very modest manner and living by the rule of cash is king. If he wants a new car, he doesn't buy it until he can afford to pay cash for it. Yeah. And it speaks a lot to a guy who just went out and spent, $65,000 or $70,000 on a brand new Jeep Rubicon and just walked in and said, "Here's a check. This is what I want." Yeah. But it's because he has the discipline to wait. So anyhow, that's a whole nother conversation that we can get into. So you've got those different types of property. When it comes to investing in retail, when you're talking about purchasing or selling your retail, like I've got a spot right now that I've got for lease that could be considered retail, but it's also kind of like a weird office retail type kind of setup. So the location isn't really good for retail, even though it's off of I-45. It's not at a major intersection. So it actually winds up being better for an office because it's past the exit. And so because it's past the exit, it's not easy access to get to and from. But if you've got an office or something where somebody's going to come to, it's still easy enough access to the neighborhood or whatever where people will come and office here. And specifically in it, we've got a daycare. And so daycare and a couple other office people that are running this space. And this piece of property is currently up for sale. And we're asking right on where it should be, But most people see the interest rates and they're like, ugh, and they kind of staying away, even though we've had a significant drop in interest rates. It's still not the easiest. I think that we're going to see a lot more movement, especially in this last quarter, once the election is behind us. I think you'll find commercial is going to see a big spike in sales come late November through December. Like once this goes through, and we know where we're going to be. Mm-hmm. And it's not about who's going to win. It's about the fact that people will either A, understand that we are where we are and it's not going to change, or B, here comes some changes that are going to be good for the economy either way. But either way, you're going to have at least an additional 4 to 8 years of time where people aren't going to wait to invest. And so I think it's just going to depend on how they spend their money.
And isn't that interesting, because you're basically saying they're going to spend their money no matter what?
They are. It's just how they're going to spend their money.
Everyone's going to wait until.
Yep. Because I mean, the biggest thing is again, do we have another 4 years of what we've already been experiencing? Mm-hmm. Where absolutely interest rates are going to come down. Yep. Or potentially 8. So, are interest rates going to come down slowly, or are we going to get, interest rates, get somebody back in and interest rates are going to come down a little bit quicker, and we're going to see a reinvigoration of the economy through loosening of regulation, And so it's either more of what we've already got, they're going to spend their money, they're just going to spend it differently, or it's going to be more of what we had before and they're going to spend their money, they're just going to spend it differently. So that's retail. Retail, like I said, once you start looking at it, investing in retail, the biggest thing you'll find is a lot of people will buy a retail property that is not producing, that is somewhere between 50 and 80% filled, so that they've got somewhere between 20 and 50% vacancy. Mm-hmm. They'll come in, they'll buy it, do everything they can to get it all the way up to about 95% vacancy, or 95% filled with only a 5% vacancy, and then sell it off if they were paying cash, and they get a nice big chunk of return. And it usually takes, 6 months to a year if you have a really, really good listing agent that's going to take care of you, and you've picked a good property to get people in.
Yeah. And so with retail, like the spaces that you're speaking about, those are typically like strip centers where you're on a major thoroughfare or at a major intersection.
Yeah. So don't think of Walmart, but think of the little shopping center right next door to Walmart, where it's not the actual
and
correct
dry cleaner,
the little Caesars and all that kind of stuff. Right. There's a very good chance they have restaurants in them, but they're not standalone.
The eyelashes next to the nail salon, and then the Botox place next to that.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the places that we're talking about when we're talking about retail sales. Now, big box stores, those places, surprisingly enough, they usually rent. They don't, like when you're talking about like your big Walmarts, CVS, Walgreens, those places do what they do. They call a build to suit, which is something that a lot of people don't really talk about. And so, like, let's say that you owned a piece of land. It was 1 acre on a major thoroughfare, Interstate 45, 146, some major road. Mm-hmm. And you said, hey, here's the deal. I don't want to sell this land. I want to lease it, but I don't know who I want to lease it to. I just want to lease it out. And so you're going to do what's called an absolute net lease, which means you're going to say, I want X number of dollars for this piece of land every year, period. Whatever the taxes are, whatever your insurance cost, your maintenance, all that stuff, 100% of that belongs to you as the person that wants to lease it. So I come to you and say, hey, I want to put a Chili's on this place, or a Walgreens. And you say, okay, cool. I'm going to build you your Walgreens. You're going to provide me with the information that you need to have it permitted, pulled, construction. You're going to actually have it built for me. and then I'm going to sign probably a 15 to 20 year lease with multiple 10-year extension potentials.
Yeah.
And most of the time you see those go for, 15 to 40 years. And when the area is dried up and nobody needs a Walgreens anymore, or I'm not making any money, then I will either go and sublease that space out, or if it's the end of my contract. Yeah, Spirit. That's exactly how Spirit of Halloween works. That is exactly how that model works. So a good example is so Texas Flex Fitness is one of my biggest and best clients. Texas Flex Fitness opened up their brand new gym at Barry Boulevard and Space Center, and it was very imperative that last year we signed our contract before the end of July.
Okay.
The reason is if not, they already had a recurring circular contract with the Spirit of Halloween that if they did not get it signed, then they would automatically have re-upped the Spirit of Halloween, and my client would have been up a creek until after the new year, basically.
Gotcha.
And so that's exactly.
Did you hear Spirit Halloween is now going to transition into Spirit Christmas after Halloween?
Yeah, great.
So, and then, maybe their business model will further be like just hit all the holidays, like become Spirit Valentine's,
a full-time retail store,
Spirit Easter, but just change. I'm intrigued. We'll see.
Yeah. So Christmas. So I think the thing that's crazy is Christmas and Halloween are probably your two biggest retail times, right?
Yeah.
Like people buying costumes and all things Halloween. So it kind of makes sense. Spirit of Halloween. Christmas, you know how it is. You go to the Nutcracker market and you got people that, let's just talk about it. Let's just face it. It's you. You're one of the Nutcracker people, right?
I am.
Yeah. You go out and spend
headband,
redonkulous. And you'll spend redonkulous amounts of money on things that nobody but you wants. It's okay because it makes you happy, right? And you get to walk around eating roasted chestnuts and drinking, hot chocolate and stuff like that, walking around the cold Nutcracker market. And there's a lot of people that do it, and it's a big freaking deal. I mean, the fact that we have these giant pop-up markets that open up for it. So Spirit of Halloween turning into a Spirit of Christmas, that it's just insane that they never did it before.
Yeah,
it really is. So
that was a very, very long tangent of retail.
Yeah, of retail, but true. And so
they can have these long leases, and then if Walgreens needs to leave, they can sublease it.
Exactly. They still make their at least break even on those months, or do better than break even on those months. And so the lease is the lease. You have to pay the monthly rent, even if you're not operating the business.
But
it's not just about the rent. So like, right, as a buyer, as a seller, as a landlord, and as a tenant, you have to understand that there are certain amounts of certain things. So let's say you came to me and you wanted to open up your very own Spirit of Christmas, right? And you wanted to open your own little Nutcracker market thing. And let's just say you wanted to do a year-round Christmas store, which there are a couple of them out there that are pretty successful. And so you came to me and said, hey, I want to open up my own store. I'm like, all right, cool, let's do that. So we find the right spot, we find the right location. Well, now we have to deal with the landlord, right? And so we have to deal with the landlord. And you say, okay, well, we need to work on two major things. Number one, we already know the rent's going to be X number of dollars, depending on the location you're in. Honestly, the city and the area is already going to have a pretty well set cost. And so, like, for instance, if you're in League City, just about anywhere in East League City, close to Kemah, South Shore Harbor, you're at $24 to $30 a month. Some of them are pushing $36 a month. I'm sorry, $36 a square foot. I said a month. But no, it's not per square foot per month. Thank God. That is per year. And so we talk retail leases are spoken in cost per square foot per year.
per year.
And
Got it.
so easy way to remember that is $12 a foot is $1 per square foot per month.
Okay.
And so if you're at $36, then you're at $3 per square foot per month.
Okay.
So if you got 1,000 square foot space, it's at $36 a foot. It's $3,600 a month, or sorry, $3,000 a month. And that's before triple nets or nets. And we can go into that. That's a whole another thing.
Yeah.
I honestly think that I could probably hold an entire conversation for 45 minutes talking about the difference between nets and gross leases and modified gross leases and so on and so forth. But the two things that you and I really care about are really going to be, hey, we found the right spot. And so we already know that we're going to pay X number of dollars for lease. We already know we're going to pay X number of dollars for our triple nets. That's just pretty normal no matter where we go. But we want to know how much free time we're going to get to be able to build your space out, because you're going to have to build your space out. And how much money is the landlord going to give you to build your space out? And that means that the landlord is very likely going to give you what's called TI, or tenant improvement dollars, to build out your square footage. And so generally speaking, we can get anywhere between $0 and $10 a square foot, just depending on how far along we are in a space. If it's a vanilla box and everything needs to be done, and a vanilla box is basically a box with doors.
Yeah.
And so if everything needs to be done, we might be able to get, $30 a foot. If there's plenty of everything set up, like your restaurant, your mop sink, all that stuff is already set up, then there's a good chance that we're only going to be able to get $5 or $10, but it's enough for you to change out your flooring, paint the place, put in your shelves, and be in good shape and get started. But depending on the city you're dealing with, you're going to need free time, because you don't want to pay for a space that you haven't even fixed up yet.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be able to work out, do we need 60 days? Do we need 90? Do we need 120? And cities can be difficult. I've got a client that has a very, very small space that we're dealing with right now. They signed the lease 4 months ago, and the city still hasn't given them their certificate of occupancy over a couple little minor issues that we just can't get the city to see past.
Yeah.
And it just kind of is what it is, and you are at the mercy of the city.
Yep.
So moving on from there.
Inspector.
Yeah. It's a pain. So moving on from there and go from retail. So we've already talked about multifamily, industrial, retail. You got land. Land kind of falls into its own little category, but it can be rural. It can be set up for multifamily. You got places that have zoning, like Texas City, Webster, LaPorte. Like majority of the cities on the planet have zoning, with the exception of Kemah and Houston. Yeah. Houston itself does not have zoning. You can build a house right next to a chemical plant, or a chemical plant right next to a house. They don't care. As long as they're collecting tax dollars, they don't care at all. And so knowing your zoning, what can be built there, what's the highest and best use of that actual land is really where you try to key on. And that's just a matter of knowing your business, knowing the location, knowing your cities. And that's why it's so imperative to not just hire some agent to sell or to even help you buy that doesn't know the locations of where to put your type of business, versus places that somebody that's from Dallas trying to buy land in Houston, or somebody from Dallas trying to sell land in Houston. And that's kind of where some of the bigger agencies fail is you're just another number. And they're going to do what they can to try to help you. But if you can't, whatever, there's 5 other guys in line waiting for them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of that. So let's see, multifamily, land, industrial, retail, office space. So now office space is
not
hurting.
Retail, which I think for like when I first figured that out, it kind of surprised me, but it does make sense. It's
so think about our office
for the
right?
space.
Think about our office at KW Clear Lake. So KW Clear Lake is an actual office building, and downstairs feels like it could be potential retail space, but it's not, because then you'd be taking away and detracting from the actual retail space in front of the office space that's also owned by the same landlord. And so we've got a 5-story or 6-story office building?
5, 4.
And man, offices are hurting bad right now. Ever since COVID, they have been struggling because of all the people that work from home. That's right. And so the one space that's been doing really well that will never go away, however, is medical offices, which again, a whole nother slew of factors that you have to worry about. So you're not just talking about having space for conferences and offices and gathering and restrooms and stuff like that, but now you've got to have, what kind of doctor is it?
Yeah.
There's what kind of testing is the doctor going to do? Do they require certain amounts of ventilation? Do they require certain amounts of radiation protection? Do they, there's all those things that these doctors have to do that can completely and totally change the use of the building. Now, most of that's going to be put on the actual doctor moving in, but if you're going to be the owner of the building offering tenant improvements, that doctor might tell you, hey, I've got to install a $70,000 vent hood. And it just is what it is. And I'm not paying for it because I'm improving your building. And you've got to figure out how to work around that with that doctor and their agent. So
and with things like that, do those pieces stay in the building after that?
Absolutely.
Like if that doctor fires and leaves, like that stays.
Yep. So the thing is if you are in fact, let's just say if you're leasing a property, when you lease a property in your contract, when you go to lease a space, you sign in your contract, you're signing your contract basically saying that the landowner also owns all of your chattel. So all of the things that you do business with is now owned by the landlord. So even if it's your stuff, like let's say you decided you wanted to open a restaurant, and so you brought in brand new ovens, rolling freezers and refrigerators and deep fryers and all that stuff, stoves, everything you could use to open your business. Even though you're the one that bought and paid for it, it's technically owned by the landlord because if you default on your lease, they want that stuff to be able to turn around and make back the money that they gave you to build out your space or to fulfill your actual lease. And so now, in order to make their property worth more money so that they can actually make up for it, they need that stuff so that they can put in another restaurant. So, and that goes with whatever it is. There's a great little place that my wife and I use for doing custom t-shirts called Tailored Vinyl. And in Kemah. And I don't know about that landlord. He seems like he's a pretty chill landlord, but most landlords would consider all of her equipment that she does custom vinyl with their equipment. And so this is like $40,000 machine that if she defaults on her lease, no longer belongs to her. So anything attached to the property, vent hoods and stuff like that, is just like your regular residential property that belongs to the property, not the person that paid for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What else we got after office space?
I think that pretty much sums up the majority of everything that we'd be dealing with. I mean,
what do RV and mobile home parks fall in? So
RV mobile home parks, those are kind of their own little things. Same with like self-storage. Self-storage, RV parks, mobile home parks. Those are kind of on their own thing. They're great investments, but people have a really hard time moving into them because they know how easy money it is. It's really high risk, but really easy money. And so they sell for a premium. And right now, like there's a lot of cities and counties that are really pushing to stay away from new mobile home parks, or not mobile home specifically, but like new RV parks and, mini storage and storage facilities, period, because they don't look very pretty.
Yeah.
Excuse me. They don't look very pretty. And they're hard to get started and build. Now, that also means that the existing ones are also worth more money because the ability to build them out is getting harder. And so those things like you and I've talked about it, like you and your husband have talked about potentially getting into a mobile or sorry, into a mini storage type kind of a place. And there is potential there to get in, but it would be one of those things where you definitely want to take and really make sure that you can get solid numbers before you just jumped in.
Yeah.
Because there's some that are just trash. And then you got some that are just like Life Storage right here at the end of Kirby, that are great mini storage places, but they're also super expensive. But because of the location, doesn't matter how expensive they are, they're full. I'm trying to downsize from a 10 by 10 to a 5 by 10 or a 2 by whatever, 4 by 10, whatever it is. And they're like, sorry, we don't have any available. Have a nice day. Pay $160.
Yep.
So, but those are good ones.
Very cool. I will say I learned something. And
what'd you learn?
That warehouse just I did not think that the height of the ceiling could make that much of a difference, because I didn't think, like, what are you doing with it? But it makes sense that, like, if you have storage racks and forklifts, like, that's just where you store stuff, and going up instead of out and can be valuable.
Yep. So if you have it's kind of like the earth, right? The warehouse is your finite amount of space that you have to live in, and you've got to be able to make value. And so the only way to make your value is to go up. That's all you've got is to go up. Yeah. And so racking and stacking, and that's the name of the game. You got to make every square inch of that space as valuable as possible, because just like in the world, you still have to have roads to be able to get to the houses and the businesses. So in a warehouse, you still have to have aisles and walkways to be able to get to the freight. Yeah. And so it's not all usable space. You still only get about 70 to 75% usable space. So the only way to gain more, got to go up.
Yep. Very interesting.
Heck yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
Nope. I think that we're pretty well good. This has been a good one. I didn't think that we could talk about this for 50 minutes, but apparently I can talk about anything for 50 minutes.
I feel like that is not the issue. The topic is not the issue, and you talking is not a problem.
Thanks. I'm pretty sure my wife would concur, but
yes.
So it's funny. We got taken on a Christian radio show called Hedges and Highways, and it was the show has been canceled since, or is closed since, but it's like a 45-minute long show, and like they kind of had to cancel me. They're like, okay, shut up.
Right. Time is up.
And so we get done, and this is a live radio, interview. And my wife, as we're leaving, she's like, "Yay, I got to say hi." so I was like, "Yeah, me talking too much is definitely not a problem."
Yep. You can carry us.
So. Well, hey, it was a little bit of a different show. We missed out on Josh today, but I still think it was good information. Hopefully everybody agrees.
I think it's just helpful for people to know when you're starting a business, or when you are in business, but maybe you've been in business in your home and it's time to venture out. And that could literally be anything. I mean, I know people that are therapists that have been doing telemed. Okay, well, so what if they now want to get out of their home and start seeing patients like that?
Right.
There's that. There's people that do, craft businesses or, vinyl businesses in their home. Yep. And now it's time to go out. You could be a personal trainer, just training in your home gym or like home garage. And it's time. So there's so many different facets that you could have a business, and now it's time to move out of your home, and you don't know what type of property you want. So I I love learning about the different types of properties. And then, like you said, I mean, call JP when you want to start talking about all the different nets.
Yeah. And the biggest thing that always, man, I always try to tell everybody is, you know, if you're calling the number on the sign, you're calling the enemy.
Yeah.
You are asking them to give you the best deal when they have no reason to give you the best deal. If you call an agent and say, hey, I need help, and they've never done something before, you're going to take a leap of faith in trying to hope that they've got somebody that backs them. I mean, as I've had, that's more or less how I got in. Was, you know, I was thankful enough to have, or blessed enough to have a couple of brokers that helped me through my first couple of deals. Chandra Broughton has been there for all of my deals. But if it wasn't, I would not have had the confidence to do any of my deals had it not been for, you know, Clay Smith, which was one of my first brokers, and Chandra, that's there to help. But the biggest thing is either way, you're still better off with an under-knowledged agent than you are talking directly to a landlord or a business owner or somebody direct. I mean, you are just doing yourself harm.
Well, and we say that in the on the residential side about new construction home builders. I mean, yes, there's a sales rep there in the house that you go into tour that can help you.
But who does that sales rep?
Exactly. They work for the builder. Their job is to get the builder the best deal, not the buyer the best deal. They may, and they have incentives, yes, that they're allowed to offer. And so they throw these things at you, and yet those are already built in. You're going to get those whether or not you have someone on your side or not. And
well, if you have an agent, you might not get but two of those incentives. Instead, you might get all of those incentives.
Exactly. And you'll have someone going to bat for you if something goes south or there's a disagreement. Like there's somebody there for you instead of just somebody for the builder, and you, or, you know, in commercial, just someone there for the landlord that says, oh, too bad, so sad, take it or leave it. You want it? Oh, because they know that you want it. And so it's like,
yeah. Well, and the other thing is I love when you're talking about residential builders and they're like, oh yeah, you know, don't worry about it. We have to get it inspected by the city. So you don't really need to inspect it. And I'm like, if you tell me I don't need to inspect something, I probably need to really, really inspect it.
I love when my new construction buyers get inspections and I get to send it off to them, to the builder.
Yeah.
there is stuff. The inspector finds stuff. Now, some of it, like there was one time, I know this is not a residential segment, but this is my favorite. It came back and it said that the light switches were lower than they were supposed to be.
Yep.
Like, my buyer was not really concerned about it. I mean, the light switch is where the light switch was. And then the builder came back and said, well, we put our light switches lower because in this type of home, thinking of people that may need a wheelchair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that made sense. There's a reason for it. The buyer wasn't really that concerned about it, but that same one, there was also some shingles that were not nailed in on the roof. So you get a windstorm come through, those are going to fly away. And so, I mean, they fixed it. Like,
yeah, exactly. And just because they got an inspection from the city, it's not the same. Not the same.
The city inspector may not be climbing up on that roof. You don't
know. Exactly. Probably not climbing on the roof, you know? Yeah. Well, hey, it was a great show. I got to talk a lot.
Yeah. Work out.
I didn't have to interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you.
I got to ask questions, so it was good.
Hey. So, you know, guys, we'll have Josh on next week. Next week actually is a great week. So I know that if you got tired of hearing me ramble today, that next week we will be having Amy Reed with the University of Houston Small Business Development Corporation coming through. Instead is the U of H SBDC, mouthful, of course. But Amy is freaking awesome, and she is a free resource for all of you people that are just trying to get into business for the first time. Those people that we were just talking about that have never gotten into a landlord situation or wanting to own a lease. She can help you put together business plans and all that kind of stuff. And so again, next week's guest is Amy Reed. It's going to be super awesome. She is such a sweet lady. So you guys have a blessed week. We will see you next Thursday, 5 a.m.
Woohoo! Bye.
Bye.